بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهدي الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلله فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. عباد الله، أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل، ونستفتح بالذي هو خير. أن الحمد لله ما حمده الحامدون، والحمد لله حمد الذاكرين الشاكرين، وأن الصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وعلى من اتبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. We always start in the name of Allah, recognizing our gratitude to the Maker who has created this world and gave us the gift of life and the gift of consciousness. It is a rare gift because everything before it is a nothing, and everything after it is in the hands of Allah, and the consequences and the results are always in Allah's hands. And we pray for blessings and peace upon the Prophet Muhammad, the last of the Abrahamic prophets and the last of Allah's prophets, and upon his family and his companions and all those who followed in the footsteps of the Prophet upon the straight path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Among the dua that Muslims often repeat, very frequently repeat, and it's a dua that is taken directly from the Qur'an: اللهم لا تجعلنا فتنة للذين كفروا أو للذين ظلموا. Allah, it's a verse that basically says, Allah, don't make us a source of misguidance. Allah, don't make us a source that repels away from your religion to those who don't believe in you. And although we often repeat this dua in prayer and in jumu'ahs all over the world, you will often find people saying the same thing. But reflecting upon the meaning of this can open numerous venues of enlightenment and can, in fact, clarify the straight path in so many ways. Allah, please don't allow us to be a misguidance to others. Allah, and especially to those who don't believe in you. Of course, that begs a question, how you, as a believer, could become a source of misguidance for others. How you can, in fact, function as a fitna. As a fitna for those who are already not oriented towards God. Because it's not just that you are saying, Allah, don't allow us to be a fitna to those who are Muslims. Don't allow us to be a source of misguidance to those who are Muslims. But in fact, Allah don't allow us to be a source of misguidance towards those who are kafar, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, to those who in fact don't believe in you. Now, of course, there are two primary possible ways that this would take place. One is that you speak ignorantly, that those who don't believe, الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, would seek you out or listen to what you are saying or encounter you in some form, and in fact, because of the limitations of your own knowledge and comprehension, you are unable in a variety of ways to deliver Allah's message, or in fact that your responses, and I will come back to this inshallah because it's an important point, what you in fact articulate, what you produce in an attempt to represent, even with the best of intentions, represent Allah's religion and Allah's Sharia, the path of Allah. And here I mean Sharia both in the legalistic sense but also in the moral sense as the path of Allah, the ethical path of Allah. That in fact you represent yourself in a way that is not authentic, not true. So that's the first way, that in fact you speak out of ignorance, you say things out of ignorance. In our day and age, you write things out of ignorance, and because of that ignorance, you contribute to the misguidance of others. So instead of those others coming to Islam, in fact, you repel them away from Islam. The second way is even more intuitive. And if you think about it for even a short period of time, it's very clear. And that is, through your conduct, through your behavior, you repel those who already are unsympathetic towards Islam to further steer away from Allah's path. So that through your conduct as a Muslim and as a mu'min, you put it bluntly, you are not a good representation of a Muslim. And as a result, those who are already kuffar, those who are already non-believers, find your religion to be distasteful or unacceptable or unconvincing, or worst of all, hypocritical. We repeat this dua all the time. And in fact, if you grew up Muslim in a Muslim country, this is a classic dua. But we rarely pause to think that once you say, Allahumma la taj'alna fitnatan lilladhina kafaru, don't allow us to be a fitna for those who don't believe, that once you say that, Allah expects you to know what you're saying. And if you direct yourself in dua towards Allah, then the minimal required is that you understand the dua that you are uttering. And in fact, we know that at both planes, at both levels, this happens all the time. That Muslims do misrepresent their religion, their tradition quite often because they speak without knowledge. And even if there are the best of intentions don't materialize into consequences. Remember, in Islam that Allah requires intentionality for good deeds, but intentionality alone without good deeds is going to avail you nothing. So even if you have the best of intentions, but yet you are a fitna because you say things that you have not studied, you have not investigated, you have not done your due diligence about, or even worse, if your conduct as a Muslim, your actions as a Muslim, repel, terrify, turn off non-Muslims, unbelievers, and in fact steer them away from the faith, from Islam, then not just are you in violation of the Qur'anic normative command, but also your dua means nothing. This is quite important because there's an intimate link between the social mores and social behaviors of people, which social behavior and social mores come out from systems, fancy word, systems of epistemology, meaning systems of knowledge. And systems of knowledge come out of people's consciousness, which are molded and formed by very complex social, cultural, economic, political dynamics in any time and moment. And if you as a Muslim, having knowledge vis-a-vis your tradition is only half the game. But the other half is to connect that knowledge with the epistemological, the social cultural, the political economic circumstance of your day and age. Now, we often you don't even have to go that far. I mean, if you look at the most stark example, if you look at what people like ISIS or Daesh have done, and the way they have become, and if you look at intellectual circles, there's this raging debate about whether ISIS or Daesh is true Islam or not. And of course, Muslims who say, well, no, that's not true Islam, and all types of people that say, no, that is true Islam. Now, it's a matter, again, of the way your consciousness is formed. If you grow up with an anchoring, you were brought up in such a way that you feel personally responsible for Islam. Allahumma inna nusuki wa salati wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alameen wa ana awwalul muslimin. Allah, my prayer, my dhikr, my ibadah, even my life and my death are for you, Allah. And I I take it upon myself to be as if the first Muslim. To be as if the first Muslim. I take it upon myself to jump first in line and say, I am a Muslim. That's a dua that is in the Qur'an, a dua that was repeated often by the Prophet ﷺ. And in fact, many reports say that this was part of his dua before each prayer. And if you are brought up with a sense of responsibility, that you are, in fact, as if the first Muslim, that it is a personal sense of obligation upon you to take the covenant with Allah, the covenant of Khilafah, the covenant of being Allah's deputy on earth, Allah's viceroy on earth, and you take it upon yourself seriously, and that's the way you were raised. It would always be in your mind, Allah, if I do X, Y, or Z, am I going to be a fitna? Not in the laughable way that we often see Muslims use fitna in the sense of women enticing men, and whether the voice of women are awra or not, no. But in the sense of, Allah, am I going to be a fitna to unbelievers, to people who don't know your religion, not people who grew up as Muslims alone, but even more so, because لا تجعلنا فتنة للذين كفروا, those who are kuffar. And if you grow up understanding that, in fact, if your behavior and your words scare people away from Islam and repel people away from Islam and cause people to reject Islam, that you are going to be held responsible before Allah in the hereafter for that. If you grew up with that sense, then not only would you make it your business to understand the historical moment that you exist in, and what makes the psychology of people tick, to put it quite bluntly. You can't mold people into the way that, you can't arm wrestle them into the way that you want them to be, and you can't force them back into history, and you can't mythologize people into some stereotypical idea. But half the process of knowing is understanding reality as it is, and the historical circumstance that led to the moment in which you are in, and then saying, you know, among the worst sins possible is that I act in a fashion that ultimately in the hereafter Allah would say, why did you chase people away from my face, from my religion? If people took that to heart, I think their conduct, even in businesses, in the simplest things, in the way they treat their families, and the way they function in the society, the way they carry that label Muslim, would be materially different at so many levels. I mean, you know, the dogma that you are an ambassador to your faith is quite true. And this dua, that don't make us a source of fitna for those who are kuffar or for those who are not Muslim, is literally a verification of that dogma. You are an ambassador. But it also tells you precisely, when you look at the example of people like Daesh and ISIS and so many others that function as if Allah is not going to be Allah is not going to hold them responsible in the hereafter for the way that they represented Allah's face. Every time you say Allahu Akbar, I mean, before the International Criminal Court, there was a case of one of Haftar of Libya, one of his generals known as Al-Murfalli, and there was a lawsuit that ultimately ended up before the International Criminal Court against Al-Murfalli. And Al-Murfalli was indicted by the International Criminal Court as a war criminal, and there was a demand by the International Criminal Court to hand over Al-Murfalli. General Haftar of Libya refused to do so, and Murfalli is still in Libya free. But as I was looking at the evidence that was submitted to the International Court, and you see this individual called Murfalli and his associates executing people, and executing on video, he executed tens of people. I mean, there's so many people that he just would. But every time there's one of these executions, and then you hear the Allahu Akbars uttered all over. And I often wonder, do these people realize that in the hereafter, they're going to be held responsible not just for the life that they killed, but for every Allahu Akbar they uttered as they killed a human being unjustly and terminated life. Every time you say Allahu Akbar, you've connected your act with Islam. And when you do that, you are going to be held responsible for what that image produces in the hearts and minds, not just of Muslims, but no less importantly, non-Muslims, the kuffar, as the Qur'an alludes to them. To understand and to reflect upon the ethical foundations for our faith, and the way that our faith investigates particularly virtue, not in an abstract philosophical fashion, and not strictly in a hermeneutic textual fashion, but that ethics, there are abstract ethics, those ethics that come out of a rigorous analytical philosophical process that identifies objective non-contingent values, meaning morals or ideas, principles, like the principle of justice, for instance, that doesn't change and does not interact with socio-historical circumstance. But abstract concepts, regardless of how rigorous they might be, if they are not coupled with equally rigorous deontological thinking, and that's a fancy way of saying living ethics, living virtue, what people do on the ground, they become a form of vanity, and in my opinion, a form of paganism, because you worship the theory for the sake of the theory, but nothing else. Theories of justice, unless coupled by systematic thought about the ways that this theory can become effective on the ground, are a dangerous thing, and could often become a source of fitna in themselves, when especially they teach people that as long as you have the right theory, it doesn't matter what happens on the ground. And that's quite dangerous. And you find that also with a lot of theologies. There are a lot of people around who think that as long as I understand the difference between Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah and Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, and as long as I understand the theology of al-Wala wal-Bara, or as long as I have studied all the different theological tracks on bid'ah and so on and so forth, it doesn't matter anything that unfolds on the ground, it doesn't matter. And that in itself is also a source of fitna. But to illustrate this point, one of the narratives that has always engaged me, and I been wanting to share thoughts about it for some time now. I've always paused at when the revelation first comes to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. We know that this man, until he is 40 years old, we know he comes from a noble family, but we know that if anything constituted his fame before becoming a prophet, is that he is a Sadiq al-Amin, that he is a truthful and trustworthy person, and that he was so well-mannered that he was sort of a marvel among the merchants of Quraysh. And there's a lot to say about this in other contexts. His ethical being before becoming a prophet. When he first receives the revelation, as I'm sure all of us know, that he goes to Ghar Hira and isolates himself, pondering the Lord and supplicating the Lord, and that his wife Khadija at the time would bring him food and water, and sometimes she would stay with him for a bit around the cave and then come back home and leave him there. And then when he first receives the revelation, and we all know that, you have a small experience with a hurricane or a tornado, it freaks you out. If you have an experience with anything beyond the normal, in other words, what we today call the paranormal, it captures your attention. So he has an encounter with the angel Gabriel, and the revelation starts from there. And when he goes back home and he tells Khadija's response has always gave me a bit of a pause and something to seriously reflect on about the relationship between ethics and Islam. Khadija's words, كلا والله لا يخزيك الله أبدا. Allah would never let you down. Khadija is certain that whatever Muhammad experienced cannot be except from God, and that Muhammad has a special status with God, and Allah will never let Muhammad ﷺ down. But why so? And Khadija's explanation, the Prophet's first wife, explanation is fascinating. I've consolidated, it's reported in so many different reports with slight variations, but fundamentally, Khadija says, لا يخزيك الله أبدا, إنك لا تصل الرحم وتصدق الحديث وتكسب المعدوم وتحمل الكل وتقري الضيف وتعين على نوائب الحق. The reason that Allah cannot let someone like you down is because of your ethical qualities. You are kind and gracious with your relatives. You are truthful. You are an honest human being. تصدق الحديث means that you speak honestly and truthfully. That's what you do. وتكسب المعدوم, that when someone is powerless or penniless, without means, you come to their aid. وتحمل الكل, you are quick to help other human beings. Not just a form of generosity, but a form of obligation where you come to people's aid. وتقري الضيف, and you recognize the rights of guests. And in Islamic theology, how you treat guests is a very big deal. وتعين على نوائب الحق, and you always stand with the side of justice and truth against its opposite. A wonderfully eloquent summation of the ethical character of the Prophet before he is a prophet. Why is it that Muhammad, Allah is not going to allow any shenanigans with you? Allah is not going to allow a shaitan to come to you and pretend to be an angel. Allah is not, in fact, if anyone is going to be a prophet in our day and age, and there are reports that Khadija had, there were, at the time in Arabia, there were rumors that a prophet is going to be born, but Jewish tribes insisted that the new prophet will be an Israelite, and Arab tribes, to be quite often and to quite frank, until the prophecy of Muhammad weren't sure. I mean, they didn't dare think that Allah is going to break the pattern. Anyway, so Khadija, if anyone is going to be a prophet, it must be you because of your moral characteristics. Your moral characteristics, again, that you come to the aid of those who need aid. You stand by truth. In other words, you don't play games, you don't kiss up to the powerful and ignore the weak. You are generous towards guests and kind and gracious towards family, neighbors, your people. There is, to just bring the same idea, there is a report, if I can remember the name of the narrator, yeah, Sa'ib bin Abdullah. Sa'ib bin Abdullah was a man who didn't convert to Islam until the Fath Makkah, until the Prophet's victory over Mecca. And when the Prophet ﷺ enters Mecca and Mecca is defeated, Sa'ib bin Abdullah finds Uthman ibn Affan, the famous third caliph, and Zuhair, another one of the companions, and he says, can you accompany me to Muhammad ﷺ? And go with him to the Prophet ﷺ, and of course he informs the Prophet that he wants to become a Muslim. But the Prophet, what takes place is that Uthman ibn Affan and Zuhair start praising Sa'ib bin Abdullah, and the Prophet ﷺ says, oh, hold on, I know who this person is. You don't have to commend him to me. You don't have to praise him to me. But the Prophet's purported advice to Sa'ib has always, again, given me pause. So, يا سائب انظر أخلاقك التي كنت تصنعها في الجاهلية فاجعلها في الإسلام، أقر الضيف وكرم اليتيم وأحسن إلى جارك. Sa'ib, we know, this is part of the conversation, we know that you were a morally upright, ethical human being. And what I want you to do is that these same moral, ethical principles that you had before Islam, apply them within Islam. And what are these moral, ethical principles? You are kind and generous towards guests, ضيف. You take care of orphans, and we all know the importance of orphans in Islam. And you are kind to your neighbors. Again and again, and this is just a little snippet from again and again, if you have spent a lifetime studying and absorbing the Islamic tradition, time and time again, you find that when Allah described the Prophet ﷺ as a man of great khuluq, ala khulqin azim, it wasn't talking about an ethical character that belongs to aliens coming from outer space. It was talking about ethical character that would be recognized as such by human beings and would be, in recognizing this ethical character as what it is, instead of being repelled from the faith, being drawn to the faith, being drawn to Islam. In this day and age, it becomes even more compelling that we remember the dua of أنا أول المسلمين. Consider me the first of Muslims. Treat me. I want to be treated like the first of Muslims. Because if you allow yourself to look around you and live in a disappointment after disappointment after disappointment, where your narratives becomes narratives of victimization and loss and frustration and anger, it is very easy to say, well, in the ocean of bad ethics and bad morals, does it really make a difference what I do? But no. You, as the first of Muslims, it makes all the difference what you do. Because if you are a fitna to the kuffar, leave alone fitna to Muslims. And fitna here, not in a political sense, not in a sexual sense, but in a moral, ethical sense, then you haven't represented Allah's religion well. And if someone is steered away from Allah's religion because of that, that's a liability and responsibility you don't want in the hereafter. is just simply too burdensome, too scary, too terrifying. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم وصلى الله وسلم لكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب لله من سيئات أعمالنا ومن شرور أنفسنا. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وتوب بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. I've touched upon this in previous times, but I want to underscore, for the sake of our own moral and ethical and intellectual well-being, and the sake of the well-being of our children, I want to underscore this idea of the fitna in our modern age. In a classical sense, a fitna had a sexual connotation. There was a fitna that had a political connotation, like, for instance, the struggle between the Sunni faction and Shia faction. And then the fitnat al-rawh, or fitnat al-aql, where your own thinking becomes muddled, or your own soul becomes muddled. In the past, when the Prophet ﷺ was once asked what is the worst place within a town, and the Prophet ﷺ said it's a marketplace. And why the marketplace? Because the marketplace was the place where you found not just those who are trading their merchants, but you also found all the dua, all the preachers and evangelists and everyone who had some type of idea, thought. You had the jesters, you had the magicians, you had the tricksters. They would all appear in the marketplace, and you had the dancers, you had even the red tents, the representatives of the red tents, i.e. the prostitutes and so on. They were all viable in the center of life, the marketplace. Today, our day and age, the marketplace is the net. And when you walk through the marketplace, in a different day and age, the age in even which I grew up, you're always told, if you're going to the marketplace, get what you need, do your business. If you're heading to the mosque, go to the mosque, do your salah, come back. But be careful not to get sucked into anything unbecoming and untoward. People, we need to rekindle this, especially in our day and age with the net, especially the net. The net could be a source of great information and even possibly great education. But the problem with the net, and I spent last week some time actually looking at this, is that you have people on the net that claim to be prophets. You have people on the net that claim to be gods. You have people on the net that don't claim to be prophets, but speak as if they're prophets, as if they are inspired directly by Allah. You have people on the net that claim to be religious scholars, and they're not. They don't have the credentials of becoming. No department of religion would even touch them, but they speak about religion as if they're religious scholars. You have people on the net that claim to be everything, and it's a wide, crazy forum, and you can access everything just with a click of the button. And the attitude that, no, well, I have my intellect, it's okay, I can surf and look at everything because I have my intellect is foolish. And I'll give you just a couple quick examples. I found on the net some people, some idiots, ignorant idiots, or maybe not ignorant, maybe ill-willed, I don't know. But saying, for instance, that Surah Luqman's advice to his son was copied from a Syriac document. Why? And then they go on to show or to demonstrate that when the Qur'an talks about the donkey in the context of talking about Luqman, there is a Syriac manuscript that also talks about a donkey in Surah Luqman. And when I watched this, I wondered how many of the people watching this know that the Syriac document that they're referring to was in fact written, because Syriac was used long after Islam, was in fact written in the 12th century, i.e. some 600 years, 500 or 600 years after Islam. So if anyone copied from anyone, it's the Syriac document that copied from the Qur'an, not the opposite. I found people claiming that much of what's in the Qur'an was already revealed in the Zoroastrian holy book. But I wondered how many people know that there was no Zoroastrian holy book. It was lost. And that the first time that there was an attempt to reconstruct the Zoroastrian holy book was 500 years after Islam began. And that the Zoroastrians who attempted to reconstruct their holy book copied liberally from the Qur'an. I found people who say the root of the word bahr or the root of the word yam in Aramaic is X, in Hebrew and Aramaic is XYZ. But what they're saying is simply incorrect, because it's clear they don't know Aramaic and they don't know Hebrew. If I am a professor who's dedicated his entire life to studying this, and I just did some surfing and I said, oh my God, 90% of what I heard, if it was in a classroom, it would be a failing grade. But in order for me to correct all the mistakes, all the academic, intellectual mistakes that were committed in what I've heard, it would take me hours. I would have to lecture about Aramaic, I would have to lecture about Hebrew, I would have to lecture about Syriac, I would have to lecture about the science of manuscripts and dating manuscripts and writing manuscripts and the difference between Aramaic characters and Arabic characters and the role of dots and grammar in Arabic. You even find people who clearly don't know Arabic grammar pontificating about what something means in Arabic, and it's clear they don't have just the most simple nahu. Like for instance, I heard someone say, oh, but this cannot be alam. Alam is something that is definite, like a name is alam, because it doesn't have L before it. Well, and the idiot doesn't know that that's not the only way to identify alam in Arabic is by the L. There are a lot of things, but the problem is this, is that if you do not lower your gaze, you don't practice that virtue of ghadd al-basar on the net, and I'm not talking about pornography, I'm talking about intellectual hubris. You would have to be you would have to be some type of special creature not to become misguided, not become tuftatan yourself, to become you yourself be struck by fitna, because you have no means of verifying what you are listening to, whether grammatically, philologically, historically, sociologically accurate or inaccurate. The only thing, and the other thing that you note, while I could not locate a single Muslim channel doing nothing all day but attacking Christianity and Judaism, I couldn't find. I would find some videos of, a guy here and there saying some trash about Christianity, or a guy here and there, and I'm talking about Muslims, saying, trashing Judaism, but a sustained television channel or YouTube channel or Facebook series or whatever, deconstructing Christianity and Judaism, I couldn't find. However, I found tons of sites that do nothing but trash Islam. Now, if you haven't seen the there's a book called The Family about the rise of the Jesus movement in politics. And then now it's an HBO Netflix documentary, and I advise you to watch it, because it explains to you why Islamophobia rose, without even talking about Islamophobia. It doesn't talk about Islamophobia, but it talks about the Jesus movement in politics, and how the Jesus movement became a world power, and how there was this obsession among very powerful people in the United States to shape the world according to their vision of Jesus, and exercise enormous amount of influence, including upon Muslim countries. This Jesus movement produced an enormous amount of surplus of wealth to fund the Islamophobic industry. And that is why, if you are an Arab today and you know Arabic and you're willing to sit and trash the Prophet or the Qur'an, you can make a very good living. I know a number of Egyptians and Jordanians and others who have, I know a guy who's a high school dropout. He's a high school dropout, and he makes about $30,000 a month just from trashing Islam. This is because there are wealthy people who decided to do nothing but trash Islam. I've said it before and I will say it again. When Muslims continue to do nothing about this, if you want to do something, find the most eloquent, the most talented, the most knowledgeable Muslims, fund them to counter this Islam, because right now there are tons of channels and television stations in Germany, in England, in Norway, in Denmark, in the US that do nothing but broadcast attacks on Islam, night and day. Qur'an, Hadith, Seerah of the Prophet. And I'll tell you what, I've discovered that a lot of our children in the Muslim world and outside of the Muslim world, even if they don't become Christians, their sense of certitude about Islam gets shaken, because they're hearing stuff they can't refute. They don't have the knowledge to refute. So they get shaken. I had a friend, he was an evangelist. He would go to Jordan and evangelize and try to convert people. And I noticed that a lot of time, he doesn't ask Muslims to become Christians. He just attacks the Qur'an, attacks the Prophet. And I asked him, I'm very curious. I've never heard you talk about Jesus. You're always talking about Muhammad this and Muhammad that and Muhammad this and how he's an evil person. But I've never heard you say anything about Jesus. He said, well, my object is not to make them come to Jesus. That will come later. My object is to first make them leave Islam. Because if they leave Islam, there is a possibility later on we can cultivate them for Jesus. We can bring them to Jesus. I mean, we were speaking in Arabic, so the translation is a bit. But as long as they remain committed Muslims, there's no hope. He was sort of a flippant, arrogant guy, and he thought that he was sticking it to me and telling me that. But the years passed, and I noticed that he spoke the truth. Now, what I'm saying is, have the humility to practice lowering the gaze on the net. Have the humility. If you are not a scholar who knows Aramaic and Hebrew and Syriac, who knows Islamic history, who knows philology, who knows the Qur'an, and you might have that fitna induced in your heart by hearing things that you are not equipped, then don't click on it. There's a huge difference between an argument, a rational argument, a scholarly argument that critiques the Qur'an in an academic book that has been refereed, that I can engage. We all read Patricia Crohn's and Michael Cook's Hagerism, which, tries to deconstruct the Islamic tradition from its roots. That's fine, because it's a sustained academic argument with sites that I can verify and engage. There's a world of difference between that and the type of mudslinging. It's exactly like you're walking in the market, and in the market there are a bunch of people who are spitting and yelling curses and obscenities, and the question is, do you stop on your way to the mosque to listen to what they have, or do you keep going and lower your gaze and don't engage? I was raised by my parents that in the marketplace, when you find the belly dancers and you find the people who are doing things where they're shubali or getting into fights and cursing and cussing and so on, don't stop. That's the equivalent. I know that the net, the sexier you are, the more views you get and the more likes you get, the more ridiculous and absurd you are. But people, when you support by clicking, whether you put like or dislike, those obscene individuals, ignorant individuals, you are contributing to a fitna. You're contributing to a fitna, and you don't want to be held responsible for that in the hereafter. So the best thing is not to contribute, and to have the humility and say, until I have an opportunity to listen from a verifiable scholar, someone who spent their entire life studying and got the credentials, and someone who provides the sources for their engagements and the citations, so I in turn can verify what they say, if I wish. Don't do that to your intellect and to your heart, because they will start rotting, whether you like it or not. They will start rotting. اللهم لا تفتنا في ديننا يا علي يا عظيم يا رب العالمين واعف عنا واغفر لنا واهدنا لأقرب من هذا رشدا وانصر الإسلام وعز المسلمين يا علي يا عظيم. Allah, we beg of you to accept our prayers, to accept our iman, to make us draw closer to you, and to love you unconditionally, Ya Allah. Allah, we beg of you that you do not allow us to become a fitna to others, whether Muslims or Muslims. Ya Ali, Ya Azim.